What if I told you that 1,517 people died because of a rule that was written but never enforced? April 14th, 1912, 11:40 p.m. The RMS Titanic, 740 feet of steel and hubris, slices through the North Atlantic at nearly top speed. 2 hours and 40 minutes later, 1,517 men, women, and children are dead in freezing water. But here's the part that should make you angry. The regulation that would have saved most of them had been sitting in a maritime law book since 1894. Welcome to Hindsight History, where we don't just tell you what went wrong, we show you what could have gone right. Today, we're diving into the most preventable maritime disaster in history. And I'm going to show you exactly 3 changes, 1 regulation, 1 technology, and 1 decision that could have turned tragedy into triumph. Let's rewrite history. 1909. The world is racing into the future. Airplanes are taking flight. Electric lights are replacing gas lamps, and the British Empire is locked in an arms race, not with weapons, but with luxury ocean liners. Belfast, Ireland. The Harland and Wolff shipyard, the White Star Line, is building the largest moving object ever created by humans, the RMS Titanic, 882 feet long, 175 feet tall, 46,000 tons of steel. It's not just a ship, it's a floating city, a symbol of human achievement. And according to the trade magazine, The Shipbuilder, it's practically unsinkable. Notice they didn't say unsinkable, they said practically unsinkable. That word should have mattered more. J. Bruce Ismay, chairman of the White Star Line, the money behind the dream. Ismay wants the Titanic to break records, not just in size, but in speed. He wants headlines. He wants to beat their competitor, Cunard, whose ships currently hold the transatlantic speed record. Captain Edward Smith, 62 years old, the millionaire's captain, a beloved figure who'd commanded ships for 38 years without major incident. This was supposed to be his retirement voyage. One last triumph before he hung up his captain's hat. He never made it home. And then there's Thomas Andrews, the ship's designer, 39 years old. Andrews is a perfectionist. He knows every rivet, every bulkhead, every potential weakness in his creation. On the Titanic's maiden voyage, he's on board taking notes, finding flaws, planning improvements for the next ship. In his cabin, he keeps detailed drawings. He knows the ship's one critical weakness: the watertight compartments don't go high enough. If more than 4 flood, the ship will sink. He knows this. He wrote it down. But Ismay wanted more passenger space, so the compartment walls were built lower than Andrews recommended. April 10th, 1912, Southampton, England. The Titanic departs on her maiden voyage to New York City. On board, millionaires in first class, immigrants chasing the American dream in third class, and a crew of 900. Also on board 20 lifeboats. British maritime law at the time required ships over 10,000 tons to carry 16 lifeboats. Titanic exceeded that. They had 20. Wait, let that sink in. The ship could legally sail with lifeboats for barely half its passengers. And here's the kicker. That regulation requiring enough lifeboats for everyone existed in proposed legislation since 1894. British maritime expert and Board of Trade advisor Sir Alfred Chalmers had pushed for it. It was rejected as too expensive and unnecessary for modern ships. April 14th. Throughout the day, the Titanic receives 6 ice warnings from other ships. 6. Heavy pack ice ahead. Icebergs in your path. Recommend altering course south. Captain Smith posts some warnings. He ignores others. Why? Because the weather is perfect. The sea is calm. And Ismay, the man paying the bills, is aboard, talking about arriving in New York ahead of schedule. The ship maintains near top speed, 22.5 knots through an ice field. Meanwhile, 400 miles away, the SS Californian stops completely for the night. Their captain, Stanley Lord, sees the ice and decides too dangerous to proceed in the dark. Two ships, two decisions. One would sink. One would watch it happen from 10 miles away. And then everything went wrong. April 14th, 1912, 11:40 p.m. Frederick Fleet and Reginald Lee are in the crow's nest, the lookout post 50 feet above the deck. They don't have binoculars. The binoculars are locked in a cabinet, and the officer with the key left the ship back in Southampton. Fleet sees it first. A dark mass against the stars, an iceberg, dead ahead. He grabs the bell, rings it 3 times. Then the telephone. Iceberg right ahead. First Officer William Murdoch answers. He has 37 seconds to react. He orders, hard a starboard, reverse the engines. The ship begins to turn, too slowly. 11:40 p.m. The iceberg doesn't hit them head on. It scrapes along the starboard side, below the waterline. It sounds almost gentle. Passengers later described it as a slight jar, or like rolling over 1,000 marbles. That gentle scraping just opened a 300-foot gash across 6 watertight compartments. 11:45 p.m. Thomas Andrews, the designer, he inspects the damage. He sees water pouring into the mail hold, rising in the cargo areas, flooding the first 5 compartments. He does the math in his head. 4 compartments, the ship survives. 5 compartments, in an hour, perhaps an hour and a half, she'll go down by the head. 11:50 p.m. Captain Smith orders the lifeboats uncovered. But here's the problem. There's no emergency protocol, no lifeboat drill. Most passengers don't even know where their lifeboat stations are, because the scheduled drill was cancelled the morning they left Southampton. Cancelled. To save time. 12 a.m. The first distress calls go out. CQD, the old distress signal. Then SOS, the newer one. We have struck an iceberg. Require immediate assistance. Position 41.46, N 50.14 W. Several ships receive the signal. The closest is the SS Californian, just 10 miles away. But their radio operator, Cyril Evans, has gone to bed 30 minutes earlier. The Californian's single radio operator worked a 14-hour day. He's asleep. 10 miles. 30 minutes. If only they'd heard the call. 12:15 a.m. The first lifeboat is lowered. It has a capacity of 65 people. It launches with 28. Why? Because the crew wasn't trained. Because passengers don't believe the ship is really sinking. It's the Titanic. Because third-class passengers are still locked behind gates meant to prevent them from entering first-class areas. Let me say that again. While the ship is sinking, gates are locked to keep third-class passengers in steerage. 12:45 a.m. The band is playing. Seriously. Bandmaster Wallace Hartley leads 7 musicians in cheerful ragtime tunes, trying to keep people calm. They never stopped playing. All 8 musicians died. 1 a.m. The truth becomes undeniable. The bow is underwater. The stern is rising. People are starting to panic. Thomas Andrews walks through the ship, no longer taking notes. He's opening cabin doors, telling people to put on life jackets to get to the boats. He's last seen in the first-class smoking room, staring at a painting, his life jacket discarded on a table. He knew what was coming. 1:30 a.m. The final lifeboats are being loaded. Officers are now firing pistols into the air to control crowds of panicked men rushing the boats. Women and children are separated from husbands and fathers. 2:05 a.m. The last lifeboat leaves. Wait. Hold on. The lifeboats that left, they weren't even full. Over 400 empty seats in lifeboats because of poor training, panic, and the belief that more boats were coming. 2:18 a.m. The ship's lights flicker and go out. 2:20 a.m. The RMS Titanic breaks in half and sinks. 1,517 people enter water, that is 28 degrees Fahrenheit, -2 degrees Celsius. At that temperature you have 15 minutes before losing consciousness, maybe 45 minutes to live if you're lucky. 4:10 a.m., the RMS Carpathia arrives. They'd heard the distress call. They'd steamed at full speed through the same ice field that sank the Titanic, risking everything. They saved 705 survivors from lifeboats. The Californian, 10 miles away, sees the Carpathia's rockets at dawn and finally steams over, too late, by 6 hours. The disaster makes headlines worldwide. The unsinkable ship sank in less than 3 hours. In New York and Southampton, crowds gather at White Star Line offices, searching for names on survivor lists. More than 1,500 families learn the worst. Within weeks, investigations begin on both sides of the Atlantic. The U.S. Senate, the British Board of Trade. Testimonies reveal the systemic failures: inadequate lifeboats, ignored ice warnings, no emergency drills, third-class passengers trapped below. This disaster changed maritime law forever. International Ice Patrol created, still operates today. 24-hour radio watch mandated on all ships. Lifeboat capacity must equal total passenger and crew capacity. Regular safety drills required by law. Ship design standards completely revised. Since 1912, 0 passenger deaths from Atlantic icebergs. These regulations have saved countless lives in the century since, but they were written in the blood of 1,517 people who didn't have to die, because every single solution already existed. So let's break this down. Why did this happen? Not the iceberg. That was random bad luck. I mean, why did 1,517 people die from it? There are 3 types of failures here. Let's go through them. First, Captain Smith maintained high speed through known ice fields. Why? Partly pressure from Ismay to make good time. Partly because calm seas and clear weather made him confident. Partly because that's what captains did. You slowed down in fog, not in clear conditions, but 6 warnings. 6. Second, inadequate lifeboat loading. Officers didn't fill boats to capacity because they either didn't trust the davits, the mechanisms that lower boats, or because panicked passengers were hard to organize. Second, Officer Charles Lightoller later testified he thought the boats would buckle if fully loaded. "I didn't think the boats could take the weight. They were designed for 65 people. He launched them with 25. This is where it gets infuriating. The British Board of Trade regulations for lifeboats were based on ship tonnage, not passenger capacity. Ships over 10,000 tons minimum 16 lifeboats. The Titanic was 46,000 tons. Still, 16 lifeboats minimum. That regulation was written in 1894, when the largest ships were 10,000 tons. Nobody updated it for 18 years, even though ships tripled in size. And here's the kicker: Parliament had debated updating it multiple times. Sir Alfred Chalmers proposed in 1894, 1902, and 1910 that lifeboat capacity should equal passenger capacity. Every time, shipping companies lobbied against it. Too expensive. Ruins the promenade deck aesthetics. Unnecessary for unsinkable, modern ships. The Californian had only one radio operator working 14-hour shifts. Marconi wireless operators were private contractors, not crew members. They worked for the Marconi company, not the ship. Their primary job was sending passenger telegrams, which made money. When Cyril Evans went to bed at 11:30 p.m., nobody was listening. If they'd had a 24-hour radio watch, which some larger ships already had, they would have heard Titanic's distress call, 10 miles away. 30 minutes. Let's talk money. Each additional lifeboat approximately £5, about $700 in modern value. To equip Titanic with enough lifeboats for everyone, roughly £500, $70,000 today. The ship cost £1.5 million to build, $400 million today. 0.03%. The White Star Line's annual profit in 1911 over £1 million. They could have afforded it with pocket change. This is the most frustrating part. 1892, the SS Naronic disappears in the Atlantic. 74 lives lost. Investigation recommends more lifeboats. Recommendation ignored. 1898, the SS Mohegan sinks. 106 dead. Insufficient lifeboats blamed, regulations unchanged. 1904. The SS Norge sinks, 635 dead. Danish government demands lifeboat reforms. British Board of Trade. Not necessary. 1906. Maritime safety expert Marcus Samuel warns the Board of Trade. Our regulations are criminally outdated. No action taken. April 14, 1912, 9 a.m. Titanic receives first ice warning. Posted, but speed unchanged. April 14, 1912, 1:42 p.m. Second ice warning. Captain Smith acknowledges but doesn't slow down. April 14, 1912, 7:30 p.m. SS Californian warns of heavy pack ice directly in Titanic's path. Message never reaches the bridge. They knew. Everyone knew. Experts had been screaming about this for 2 decades, and this wasn't unique. Humans repeat this pattern constantly. Before the Challenger space shuttle explosion, engineers warned about O-rings in cold weather. Ignored. Before the 2008 financial crisis, economists warned about subprime mortgages. Ignored. Before COVID-19, epidemiologists warned about pandemic unpreparedness. Ignored. The pattern is always the same. Experts warn about preventable risk. Those with power prioritize cost, schedule, or pride. Disaster happens. We promise never again. We forget. So if all of this was predictable, if experts had been warning about it for years, if the technology and knowledge existed, why didn't anyone stop it? Here's the most frustrating answer. Someone could have, with 3 simple changes: 1 regulation, 1 technology, and 1 decision. This goes from history's most famous maritime disaster to a close call that everyone forgot about. Let me show you how. If the British Board of Trade had implemented the proposed 1894 regulation requiring lifeboat capacity equal to total passenger and crew capacity, the Titanic would have sailed with 2,224 lifeboat seats instead of 1,178. The Titanic would need approximately 64 lifeboats total instead of 20. Now I know what you're thinking. That many boats wouldn't fit on the deck. Actually, they would. Naval architect Edward Wilding testified after the disaster that the Titanic's deck could accommodate up to 64 boats using stackable davits and additional deck space. The boats would use the Welland davit system, which was already installed and could handle multiple boats per davit. White Star Line just chose not to use the system to full capacity. The technology existed. The regulation had been proposed 18 years earlier. In fact, several German ocean liners at the time, including the SS Kaiser Wilhelm der Grosse, already carried sufficient lifeboats for everyone on board as standard practice. Why? Because German maritime law already required it. So when British officials claimed it was impractical, German ships were already doing it successfully. Cost approximately £500, $70,000 in modern money. But the real barrier wasn't money, it was optics. Too many lifeboats make passengers nervous, suggests the ship isn't safe. That's from an actual company memo. They didn't want passengers thinking about lifeboats because it might hurt the unsinkable marketing, pride and profits over safety. With 64 lifeboats, here's what happens differently. 12 a.m., Captain Smith orders all hands to lifeboats. Officers begin systematic loading, even with the same chaotic conditions. With nearly 3x more boats, the pressure is off. Families stay together because there's room. Third-class passengers have time to reach the boat deck before the ship lists too severely. The crew still makes mistakes. Some boats still leave partially empty in early panic, but with so many boats, it doesn't matter as much. 2 a.m., the last passengers are loaded. Even if boats average only 80% capacity due to chaos and poor training, that's still 1,780 seats filled versus 700. Combined with the 400 plus who could cling to debris until rescue, which happened in reality, you're looking at potentially 2,000 plus survivors. Deaths drop from 1,517 to roughly 200 minus 400. The SS Eastland disaster in 1915 actually had the opposite problem. Too many lifeboats made the ship top-heavy, and it capsized at dock. But that was due to poor retrofitting, not original design. Ships designed from the start with sufficient boats, like the SS Imperator, had no such issues. This solution alone saves 1,100 meters 1,300 lives, with £500. Solution #2 The technology 24-hour radio watch. If ships were required to maintain 24-hour radio operation with at least 2 wireless operators working rotating shifts, the SS Californian would have heard Titanic's distress call. The Californian is 10 miles away. Its operator, Cyril Evans, went to bed at 11:30 p.m., 10 minutes before Titanic struck the iceberg. With a second operator on night watch, here's what happens. 11:40 p.m., Titanic strikes iceberg. 11:45 p.m., Titanic sends first CQD distress call. 11:46 p.m., Californian's night shift operator receives signal, we have struck iceberg. Require immediate assistance. 11:50 p.m., Captain Stanley Lord of the Californian is woken. He immediately orders engines to full steam ahead. 12:20 a.m., the Californian arrives. They're there before most lifeboats have even launched. The Californian pulls alongside the Titanic while she's still afloat. Now passengers can board a stable ship instead of lifeboats in freezing seas. Orderly evacuation instead of panic. Families don't separate. Children don't have to be lowered 60 feet in the dark. Third-class passengers have time to reach the deck. The Californian could handle 700 meters 800 additional passengers comfortably in an emergency. Combined with lifeboats taking the rest, and the Carpathia, which is also responding, arriving an hour later, nearly everyone survives. Estimated casualties around 100 meters 200, primarily from initial impact injuries. Larger passenger ships, like the RMS Olympic, Titanic's sister ship, already employed multiple radio operators for extended service hours. The Marconi Company offered 24-hour contract services. Ships just had to pay for a second operator, cost approximately £200 per year, $28,000 in modern terms, for a second operator's salary. Wireless operators were considered a luxury amenity, not safety equipment. They were there to send passenger telegrams, which generated revenue, paying for overnight coverage when passengers were asleep. Shipping companies saw it as wasted money. After Titanic, 24-hour radio watch became mandatory within a year. Post 1913, major shipping incidents with nearby vessels had an 89% successful rescue rate. It works. We know it works because we mandated it after Titanic and rescue success rates soared. The solution was proven. We just needed 1,517 people to die before we implemented it. Solution 3. The decision, heeding ice warnings. If Captain Smith had reduced speed to 15 knots from 22.5 knots after receiving multiple ice warnings, the Titanic would have had twice the reaction time to avoid the iceberg. This is the simplest solution. It requires no new technology or regulations, just a decision. 7:30 p.m., April 14th. Captain Smith receives ice warning from SS Californian. Heavy pack ice directly in your path. In our timeline, he posts it but maintains speed. In the solution timeline, he orders speed, reduced to 15 knots, and posts additional lookouts. At 22.5 knots, 37 seconds from sighting to impact. At 15 knots, around 74 seconds from sighting to impact. That's double the reaction time. 11:40 p.m., Frederick Fleet spots the iceberg at the same distance. But now the ship is moving slower. The turning radius is tighter. The momentum is lower. Officer Murdoch orders hard a starboard. The ship begins to turn. With 74 seconds instead of 37, the bow swings clear. The iceberg scrapes along the side. Passengers feel a jolt, but it's a glancing blow, not a 300-foot gash. Maybe 1 or 2 compartments flood instead of 6. With only 2 compartments flooded, the Titanic stays afloat. She limps into New York 2 days late with a hell of a story, and some very shaken passengers. Casualties 0 to 5 possible injuries from impact. Thomas Andrews becomes a hero for his design resilience instead of dying with his ship. Captain Smith retires as planned, and 1,517 people live full lives. This required nothing but judgment. Other captains made this call. Remember the SS Californian. Captain Lord stopped completely for the night when he saw ice ahead. Ice ahead in calm, clear conditions at night is the most dangerous scenario. Slow or stop. That's from the 1911 Maritime Safety Manual. It was in the manual. Competitive pressure. Ismay wanted good time. Smith wanted to maintain his reputation. And here's the tragic part. Calm, clear weather made them overconfident. The perfect conditions that made them feel safe were actually the most dangerous. In calm seas you can't see the foam breaking around icebergs. They're invisible. After Titanic, the International Ice Patrol was established to track icebergs. But even before that, Cunard Line ships already had standing orders to slow down in ice fields. The SS Carpathia, the ship that rescued Titanic's survivors, had steamed through the same ice field at full speed, but only after the disaster, when lives were at stake. Before that, Carpathia's captain would have slowed down. Standard practice. Smith knew better, most feasible at the time. Slow down, no cost, just a decision. 24-hour radio, £200 per year. More lifeboats, £500 one time. Most effective, 24-hour radio plus nearby ship equals around 2,000 saved. Sufficient lifeboats equals 1,100, 1,300 saved. Slow down avoids disaster entirely. Fastest to implement, speed reduction, could have been ordered at any moment. The brutal truth. All three solutions combined cost less than £700, $100,000 today. All three solutions combined cost less than a single first-class suite sold for the voyage. Now you might be thinking, this is hindsight bias. They didn't know what would happen. Let me address that. They absolutely knew. 18 ships sank due to ice collisions between 1882 and 1912. 6 official warnings about inadequate lifeboats between 1892 and 1910. 4 different maritime experts testified before Parliament about these exact risks. This wasn't unknown territory. This was a pattern, but ships couldn't carry that many lifeboats. German ships already did. The SS Imperator carried boats for 5,500 people, every passenger and crew member. It sailed successfully for years. The crew wasn't trained for full evacuation anyway. True. Which is exactly why the cancelled lifeboat drill matters. But here's the thing, even with undertrained crew and partial chaos, having 64 lifeboats instead of 20 still saves over 1,000 additional lives. Perfection wasn't necessary, just adequacy. Here's what keeps historians up at night. Thomas Andrews, the designer, wanted the lifeboats. He drew up plans for 64 boats. Rejected. Captain Lord of the Californian wanted to install a second radio operator. Told it wasn't in the budget. Sir Alfred Chalmers proposed the lifeboat regulation 3 times over 16 years. Defeated by shipping company lobbyists every time. The experts knew. They warned. They proposed solutions. And they were ignored by people who prioritized profit margins and marketing optics over human lives. 1,400 people died because 3 simple, affordable, available solutions were rejected. That's not hindsight. That's negligence. So why are we talking about a 113-year-old shipwreck? Because we're still making the exact same mistakes. 2003 Columbia Space Shuttle disaster. Engineers warned about foam strikes damaging heat shields. Not a safety concern, management said. 7 astronauts died. 2011 Fukushima nuclear disaster. Scientists warned the seawall was too low for potential tsunamis. Too expensive to fix, officials said. Meltdown. Evacuation of 150,000 people. 2017 Grenfell Tower fire in London. Residents warned about fire safety for years. Cheaper flammable cladding was used instead of fire-resistant materials. 72 people died. 2025 Climate scientists have been warning about extreme weather events for decades. Implementation of prevention measures, inconsistent. I'm not here to push an agenda. I'm just pointing out the pattern. Experts warn, authority figures dismiss. Disaster happens. Nobody could have predicted this. Repeat, to be fair, the Titanic disaster did change things. Within 1 year of the sinking, International Ice Patrol established, monitors icebergs to this day. 24-hour radio watch, mandated on all passenger ships. Lifeboat capacity regulations completely rewritten. SOLAS, Safety of Life at Sea, treaty created, the first international maritime safety standards. Ship design requirements overhauled. Atlantic iceberg deaths since 1912 on passenger ships. 0. Not one passenger has died from hitting an Atlantic iceberg in 113 years. Today's cruise ships carry enough lifeboats and life rafts for 125% of capacity, not just 100%. They conduct mandatory safety drills before departure. They have redundant communication systems. They have international ice tracking. The Titanic's 1,517 victims created the safest era of ocean travel in human history. But they shouldn't have had to. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Right now, in 2025, there are experts warning about preventable disasters, infrastructure engineers warning about aging bridges and dams, cybersecurity specialists warning about critical system vulnerabilities, epidemiologists warning about the next pandemic, climate scientists warning about tipping points. And just like in 1912, there are people in power saying too expensive, not a priority right now. We'll deal with it later. The experts are being alarmist. I'm not saying every warning is correct. Some risks don't materialize. But the Titanic teaches us when multiple experts across years raise the same concern, and when affordable solutions exist, ignoring them is a choice. And choices have consequences. This isn't just about the Titanic. This isn't even just about disasters. This is about how humans make decisions. It's about the cost of ignoring expertise. It's about how short-term thinking creates long-term tragedy. It's about how pride, thinking we're too advanced, too smart, too special for disaster, blinds us. The Titanic was called unsinkable right up until it sank. But here's the hopeful part. You don't need to be in charge to make a difference. Frederick Fleet rang the warning bell. He did his job. Thomas Andrews went cabin to cabin, waking people up, giving them a chance. Wireless operator Jack Phillips kept sending distress signals until the water reached the radio room. His calls saved 705 lives. The next time you see warning signs being ignored in your workplace, your community, your industry, when you hear experts being dismissed as alarmist or pessimistic, when you see someone prioritizing convenience or cost over safety, remember, speaking up might be uncomfortable, but 1,517 people might still be alive if someone in power had been willing to be uncomfortable. Be the person who listens to the warnings. Be the person who asks, what if they're right? Be the person who rings the bell. So here's my question for you. If you were J. Bruce Ismay, chairman of the White Star Line, and Thomas Andrews came to you in 1910, asking for £700 to implement all three of these solutions, knowing it would delay the ship's launch by 2 weeks, knowing it might make you look overly cautious to competitors, knowing you'd have to admit your unsinkable marketing was arrogant, would you do it? It's easy to say yes now. We know how the story ends. But in the moment, with pressure from investors, with newspapers praising your achievement, with every expert telling you this ship is the safest ever built, would you be willing to look foolish to save lives you didn't know were at risk? That's the real test. On April 15, 1912, 1,517 people died in the North Atlantic because 3 simple, affordable, available solutions were rejected in favor of pride, profit, and overconfidence. In a better timeline, the Titanic arrives in New York 2 days late with a damaged bow, a humbled crew, and a powerful reminder that nature doesn't care how advanced we think we are. We can't change what happened, but we can choose to learn from it. Here's what I want from you. Comment below. What historical disaster should we tackle next? What event do you think had a preventable solution that nobody talks about? Drop your suggestions. The most upvoted comment becomes our next episode. And if you believe history should come with solutions, not just tragedy, hit that subscribe button. We're covering the Challenger disaster next week, and you won't believe how many engineers tried to stop that launch. Before I go, I want you to think about this. John Jacob Astor IV, 47 years old, Isidore and Ida Strauss, married 41 years, refused to be separated. Thomas Andrews, 39 years old, died with his ship. Michel Navratil's 2 sons, ages 2 and 4, survived. Their father didn't. The 8 musicians who played until the water reached the bandstand. Sydney Leslie Goodwin, 19 months old. 1,517 names. 1,517 lives. 1,517 reasons to listen when someone rings the warning bell. History doesn't have to repeat itself. We just have to listen.